A single pregnant mother left coffee on her boss's desk until he discovered it and wanted to meet her. Secrets came to light, and their lives changed forever. A story of forbidden romance that will touch your heart. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment on where you are watching from. The digital clock on the central air conditioning read 6:30 a.m. when David Anderson walked through the revolving doors of the Skyline corporate tower, raising the collar of his Hugo Boss suit against the March morning breeze. At 35, he bore not only the weight of a construction empire valued at $3 billion, but also the responsibility of proving daily that he deserved to occupy the presidential chair he inherited from his father 2 years ago. His footsteps echoed on the Italian marble of the lobby as he greeted the night doorman with a curt nod. David knew every detail of that building, from the imported Czech crystal chandeliers to the carefully arranged ornamental plants in strategic corners. After all, it had been one of the last projects personally supervised by his father before the sudden heart attack that took him at 62. The panoramic elevator glided silently to the 32nd floor, revealing through the bulletproof glass the awakening city of Chicago under the last stars. The orange lights of the street lamps mingled with the first rays of sunlight cutting through the morning fog, creating a spectacle that David had watched every morning for 730 consecutive days, without exception. His hands, calloused only from years at the gym and running, typed the code for the presidential office. The frosted glass door opened with an electronic whisper, revealing the environment he had designed himself, a solid mahogany table dominating the center, genuine leather armchairs facing the glass wall that offered a privileged view of the Chicago River, and shelves filled with technical books on engineering and management that he actually read during sleepless nights. It was then that David stopped mid-stride, his eyebrows furrowing in genuine confusion. On his desk, exactly where he usually left his daily planner, sat a steaming white porcelain cup. The aroma wafting through the room was unmistakably familiar, freshly brewed Brazilian coffee with that sweet hint that vaguely reminded him of Sunday mornings at his grandmother's house in Aspen. Next to the cup, a small mound of golden, glistening sugar awaited on a paper napkin, accompanied by a handwritten note in delicate cursive. May this day be filled with achievements, and may every decision you make build bridges, not walls. Someone who believes in you. David remained still for long seconds, processing the scene. His routine was meticulously planned. Arrival at 6:30, email review until 7 Kun, coffee brought by the secretary at 7:15. Never before. The cleaning crew worked from 11 p.m. to 5 a.m., and security made rounds every hour. How on earth had someone entered his office, and more intriguingly, why? He cautiously approached the desk, as if the cup might explode at any moment. The coffee was at the perfect temperature, neither too hot nor lukewarm, and the steam rising in lazy spirals carried aromatic nuances that his olfactory memory couldn't fully categorize. It was different from the coffee he drank every day, richer, with a hint of damp earth and caramel that awakened long-forgotten sensations. He picked up the note between his fingers, analyzing the handwriting. The letters were well-formed, with a delicacy that suggested education, but there was a slight haste in the strokes, as if it had been written in a rush. The paper was ordinary, one of those notepads you could buy at any corner stationery store, but the ink was of superior quality, royal blue without smudges. "Mr. Anderson?" Sarah's voice, his secretary, came through the intercom, startling him. "Have you arrived? I brought your coffee as always, but I hear voices in there." David pressed the intercom button, keeping his eyes fixed on the mysterious cup. "Sarah, please come in, and bring John from security." While he waited, he circled the desk like a detective analyzing a crime scene. There were no signs of forced entry, nothing out of place, no clue as to how that cup had ended up there. The air conditioning system was functioning perfectly, maintaining a constant temperature of 70 degrees, but the aroma of the coffee created a cozy atmosphere that contrasted with the calculated coldness of the corporate environment. Sarah hurried in, a 45-year-old woman who had worked at the company for 15 years and had known David since he was just the doctor's son. Her eyes widened at the scene. "My God, David! How did that cup get here? I am absolutely certain I locked your office at 7:30 p.m., as I always do." John arrived shortly after, a 50-year-old former military man who took the building's security seriously. His experienced eyes quickly scanned the room, noting every detail. "Mr. Anderson, I reviewed all the recordings from the night. No one entered this floor except for the cleaning crew, who worked from 11 p.m. to 4:30 a.m. as usual. They only have access to the hallways and restrooms, never to private offices." David picked up the cup, feeling the warmth of the porcelain against his palms. The first sip was an explosion of flavors. There were notes of dark chocolate, a gentle acidity dancing on his tongue, and a lingering finish reminiscent of wildflower honey. It was, without a doubt, the best coffee he had ever tasted. "John, I want you to review the recordings again, this time focusing on each employee individually. Sarah, I need a complete list of the cleaning crew that worked last night, with names, times, and areas of responsibility." "David," Sarah hesitated, biting her lower lip. Are you going to drink the coffee? What if it's some kind of malicious prank?" David had already finished half. David took a sip of his coffee, savoring each gulp. "If someone wanted to harm me, there are more efficient ways than a delicious coffee and homemade cinnamon rolls." He bit into the pastry, feeling the soft texture dissolve in his mouth, releasing a flavor of vanilla and fresh butter. "Besides, the person who wrote this note, there's no malice here. There's something more." Throughout the rest of the morning, David found himself looking at the note repeatedly, trying to decipher not only who had written it, but why. His meetings went on automatically. Discussions about project timelines, approvals, financial analyses, but his mind remained trapped on that delicate handwriting and the carefully chosen words. "Build bridges, not walls." The phrase echoed in his thoughts. Was it a subtle critique, a piece of advice, a request? When the clock struck 6 p.m., David made a decision that would surprise anyone who knew him. Instead of heading to the business dinner at the Ritz, he cancelled the commitment and decided to stay at the office. If someone was entering his office during the night, he would find out who it was and why. He settled into the recliner in the corner of the room, where he had a full view of the door and the desk, but remained hidden in the shadows. The building gradually emptied, the buzz of offices giving way to silence, broken only by the distant hum of traffic below and the soft roar of the air conditioning. At 11:15 p.m., David heard the first sounds of the cleaning crew arriving on the floor, footsteps in the hallway, the jingle of keys, muffled conversations in English mixed with Spanish. His heart inexplicably raced. A nervousness he hadn't felt since college, when he awaited the results of the most important exams, and then at 2:17 a.m. she appeared. Chapter 2. The Discovery, the First. The thing David noticed was the caution with which she opened the door, using a key she clearly shouldn't have. The second was the extreme care with which she moved through the space, as if she knew every inch of that area and wanted to preserve its sanctity. Under the soft light of the emergency lamps, he could distinguish a pregnant female silhouette, carrying a worn canvas bag over her shoulder. She was younger than he had imagined, appearing to be in her mid-20s to early 30s. Her brown hair was tied back in a practical ponytail, with a few rebellious strands escaping around her delicately featured face, marked by a quiet determination. The navy blue uniform of the cleaning company was immaculate, pressed with care, and she moved with the natural grace of someone accustomed to physical work, even while carrying a belly that indicated about 5 months of pregnancy. David held his breath as she approached his desk, pulling out a small, portable electric coffee maker, the kind that fits in one hand. With economical yet precise gestures, she plugged it into the side outlet of the desk, then removed a plastic bag with coffee beans and a small manual grinder. The low sound of grinding broke the silence of the night, a hypnotic rhythm she maintained with constant circular motions. David watched, fascinated by the concentration on her face, an almost religious seriousness, as if she were performing a sacred ritual. Her lips moved silently, and he suspected she was whispering a prayer or humming softly. As the water heated, she pulled out other items from her bag, a simple yet elegant white porcelain cup, clearly her personal property, a cinnamon roll wrapped in plastic, and a cheap notepad. She sat in his chair, his Italian leather executive chair, and began to write, nibbling the tip of the pen like a student focused on a difficult exam. The whole scene felt surreal. Here he was, David Anderson, heir to a business empire, hiding in his own office, watching a cleaning staff member prepare coffee at his executive desk. And the most disturbing part was that he felt no anger or indignation at the intrusion. He felt curiosity, a growing fascination for this woman who transformed his mechanical routine into something human. "Oh my God," she murmured softly, placing her hand on her belly. "I hope he likes the coffee today. I changed the ratio, added a little more brown sugar like my grandma taught me." Her voice was soft, tinged with a nearly imperceptible Midwestern accent that rounded the words like a vocal embrace. There was an intimacy in the way she spoke, as if she knew David personally, as if she were a genuinely concerned friend. The coffee was ready, with a discreet bubbling, and she poured it into the cup with the precision of a professional barista, not too full, leaving space for the aroma to concentrate. She placed the cinnamon roll beside it, folded the note carefully, and arranged everything in the exact position where David had found it the previous morning. But then something happened that left him completely bewildered. She clasped her hands, closed her eyes, and whispered, "Lord, bless this man today. May he make wise decisions, be fair to his employees, and find a little peace amidst so much responsibility. May this coffee bring a bit of warmth to a heart that seems so lonely." David felt something tighten in his chest. No one prayed for him. His mother considered it a waste of time. His employees saw him as a productivity machine, and his occasional girlfriends were more interested in his bank account than his peace of mind. But here was a complete stranger, asking God to bless his day. She put away the utensils with the same reverential care, cleaned any trace of her presence, and headed for the door. It was then that David noticed something that made his stomach clench. She limped slightly on her right leg, and there was a deep exhaustion in the way she carried her shoulders. That woman was clearly putting in much more physical effort. When the door closed behind her, David remained motionless for long minutes, processing what he had witnessed. It wasn't a prank, nor some elaborate scam. It was a gesture of pure and inexplicable kindness, offered without expecting anything in return. He stood up and walked to the table, where the aroma of fresh coffee created a completely different atmosphere from the usual cold corporate environment. He picked up the note of the day and read, "May your words today build dreams, and your decisions plant seeds of hope. You are stronger than you think." He had to find out who she was. The next morning, David arrived at the office with a mission. He called John for a private meeting and got straight to the point. I need information about the night cleaning crew, full names, addresses, work history, anything that can help me identify someone specific. John handed him a folder with detailed profiles. There are 12 people in total, Mr. Anderson, 10 women and 2 men. They work in pairs by floor from 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. David flipped through the profiles, looking for pregnant women. He found only one. Emily Johnson, 28 years old, originally from Springfield, Massachusetts. The photo in the document showed a young face with delicate features, expressive brown eyes, and a subtle but genuine smile. Marital status, single. Time with the company, 8 months. References, excellent. Notes, punctual and dedicated employee, never missed a day of work. John, this employee, David pointed to the profile. I need to know more about her, discreetly. Sir, if I may ask, has she done something wrong? Because Emily is one of our best employees. We've never had any issues. No, she hasn't done anything wrong. Quite the opposite. David hesitated, trying to find words that didn't sound completely crazy. She has shown exceptional dedication to her work. I want to understand her situation better to see if we can offer some kind of recognition. In fact, David spent the entire day researching Emily. He discovered that she worked 2 jobs, night cleaning in the building and part-time as an assistant at a municipal daycare in East Boston. She lived in a 1-bedroom apartment rented with her younger sister Lily, 19, a scholarship medical student at Boston University. The documents revealed a story that deeply touched him. Emily had become responsible for her sister at 16 when their parents died in a car accident. She worked as a housekeeper, waitress, saleswoman, anything that allowed her to keep Lily in school. She never had the opportunity to study beyond high school, but the references from all her previous jobs were unanimous. Intelligent, responsible, reliable. Her father, Antonio Johnson, had worked as a construction foreman. David felt a chill run down his spine when he read the name of the company where he had worked in the 90s, Anderson Construction. That night, David decided to confront her. At 2:15 a.m., he positioned himself behind the door of his office, waiting. When she entered, she gently turned on the lights. "Good morning, Emily." She turned quickly, the portable coffee maker falling from her hands and shattering on the floor. Her face paled, and she instinctively placed her hands on her belly in a protective gesture. I can explain, sir." Her voice trembled, and David saw tears forming in her eyes. "Please, don't fire me. I need this job." "Emily," his voice came out softer than he intended. "I'm not going to fire you. I want to understand why you do this." She stared at him for a long moment, as if evaluating whether she could trust him. Then, slowly, her defenses crumbled. "You always seem so alone," she said quietly. "Every day you arrive early, stay late, eat alone in the break room. I thought that maybe a coffee made with care could make your days a little better." David felt something break inside his chest. And why me? Why care about a complete stranger? Emily smiled for the first time, and it was like watching the sun rise. "Because everyone deserves a little kindness, Mr. Anderson, and because—" She hesitated. "My father always said, that kindness is the only investment that never loses." The silence that followed Emily's words was charged with a strange tension, as if they both knew they had crossed an invisible line, separating boss from employee, CEO from cleaner, 2 worlds that should never touch. David watched that pregnant woman standing in front of his executive desk, the shards of the coffee maker scattered across the marble floor like fragments of a barrier that had just shattered. "Your father," he finally said, his voice rougher than he intended. "Antonio Johnson. He worked for my company." Emily's face immediately closed off. And she took a step back. So, you know. Her words came out sharp, laden with a bitterness that violently contrasted with the sweetness she had shown moments before. You know he died on one of your job sites, that none of you showed up at the funeral, that my mother spent years fighting in court for compensation that never came. Emily, I didn't know, David began, but she interrupted him with a brusque gesture. Didn't know? Her eyes sparkled with contained tears. Of course you didn't know. You never know about the workers who die to build your beautiful buildings. She awkwardly bent down to pick up the shards of the coffee maker, protecting her belly with one hand. I'm sorry for the mess, Mr. Anderson. I'll clean everything up and never bother you again. Stop. The word came out like an order, but David quickly softened his tone. Please stop, let me clean this up. He knelt on the floor, starting to gather the pieces of ceramic. And tell me more about your father. Emily looked at him with suspicion. Why? Because... David hesitated, holding a larger shard between his fingers. Because when I was 12, my father took me to job sites every Saturday. I remember a foreman who always took the time to explain how everything worked. A short man with grey mustache who laughed loudly and called the workers my boys. He insisted on wearing a new helmet, always saying that safety was not an expense. He raised his eyes to her. It was him, wasn't it? Emily slowly sat down in the chair in front of the desk, as if her legs could no longer support her weight. Dad died because the subcontracted company didn't provide adequate safety equipment. The scaffolding collapsed. He and 2 other workers fell from the 15th floor. Jesus Christ! David closed his eyes, the memories flooding back with full force. I remember that accident. I was 17 in college. My father was devastated, cancelled all meetings for a week. He said he knew personally all the men who died. So why was nothing done? Emily's voice trembled. Why did my mum die 5 years later, still fighting for justice? David had no answer. Or rather, he did. But it wasn't a response he could offer as consolation. The truth was that his father, as devastated as he was, had followed the advice of corporate lawyers. Do not admit guilt. Do not take on responsibilities beyond what the law required. Protect the company's assets above all. That's how the corporate world worked, and David had learned those lessons without questioning. You're right, he finally said. None of this justifies what you're doing for me. Emily ran her hand through her hair, undoing her ponytail. The strands fell loosely over her shoulders, softening her tense features. I don't completely understand either at first. It was just anger. When I got this job and found out it was in the building of the company that destroyed my family. She paused, unconsciously stroking her belly. I planned to do something. I didn't know what, but something. And what changed? You. The answer came so quietly that David had to lean in to hear. On the 3rd night of work, I saw you sleeping here in the office. It was almost 4 in the morning, and you were slumped over some projects, your forehead marked by the pen you were holding. There were crumpled papers everywhere. It looked like you had been struggling with some problem for hours. David remembered that night. It was early March, just a few days before the first coffee appeared. He was reviewing the plans for the new phase of the affordable housing complex that the company was building in the East Side, his first major social project as president. You were snoring softly, Emily continued, and a ghost of a smile played on her lips. And you were talking in your sleep. You kept repeating, it has to work, it has to be safe. It was human, vulnerable. She looked directly at him. I realized you weren't the monster I imagined. You were just a man trying to do the right thing. So you decided to take care of me. I decided to get to know you better. She stood up, walking to the window that overlooked the city. The lights of Boston stretched infinitely, a sea of dreams and frustrations pulsing in the early morning. I started to observe. You always arrived early, left late. You ate lunch alone, rarely had visitors who weren't for work. Your employees respected you, but they seemed to be afraid of you. And that made you want to make coffee for me? Emily laughed, a low and musical sound that filled the room. My grandmother always said that coffee is the simplest way to show love, and my mom, her voice slightly choked, my mom said that anger is poison we inflict on ourselves. I thought that maybe if I could feel something other than anger towards you, I could forgive. David approached the window, keeping a respectful distance. And did you forgive? I'm still trying. She pressed her forehead against the cold glass. But making those coffees, leaving those notes, made me feel useful in a different way. It wasn't just cleaning, it was... She searched for the right words. It was care. And God knows you seem to need someone to take care of you. They remained silent for a few minutes, watching the city. David could smell Emily's soft fragrance, something floral mixed with the scent of neutral soap, completely different from the expensive and strong perfumes of the women he was used to being around. "Can I ask a question?" he finally said. "Sure." "The father of the baby." Emily immediately stiffened. "That's none of your business." "I'm sorry, you're right." David hesitated, then decided to be honest. "It's just that you seem to be going through this alone. And pregnant, working 2 shifts. I can handle it." The response came quickly, defensively. "I've always managed on my own." "I don't doubt it, but you shouldn't have to handle it alone." Emily turned to face him, her eyes shining with a mix of vulnerability and challenge. "Do you really want to know? The father is Mark, my ex-boyfriend. We dated for 3 years. He promised marriage, a house, a future. When I found out I was pregnant, he just disappeared, blocked my number, changed jobs, vanished. What a jerk." The look of surprise on Emily's face at hearing him curse was almost comical. David Anderson swearing. "Sorry, it's just that it makes me angry." "Why?" David couldn't explain why her story affected him so much. Perhaps because his whole life had been surrounded by selfish people, and finding someone genuinely good being treated with disdain shook fundamental concepts of justice he thought he had lost long ago. "Because you don't deserve that," he said simply. Emily studied his face for a long moment as if trying to detect signs of insincerity. "You're very different from what I imagined." "How so?" "More real. The newspapers always talk about you as if you were a money-making machine, cold, calculating, ruthless in business. And I'm not? I don't know." She smiled, and David felt something stir in his chest. A cold and calculating man wouldn't stay up late just to find out who's making coffee for him, nor would he react with such indignation upon hearing about a cowardly ex-boyfriend. They were interrupted by the sound of voices in the hallway. The cleaning crew was finishing their shift, and soon the building would start receiving the first employees of the day. "I need to go," Emily said, gathering her bag. "My shift ends at 5 and I have to be at the daycare by 7. "Emily!" She paused at the door, looking back. "Thank you. For the coffee, for the notes, for seeing me as a human when I sometimes forget that I am." "You're welcome." She hesitated, then added, "If you want, I can keep bringing the coffee. Now that you know I don't have to hide anymore." "I would love that, but..." David gestured to the shards on the floor. "I'll get you a new coffee maker. You don't have to." "Emily," his voice became firm yet gentle, "let me do this for you, please." She reluctantly nodded and left, leaving David alone with his thoughts and the lingering aroma of the last coffee she had made. He sat in his chair, picked up the phone, and dialed John. John, I need a few favors. First, I want you to erase from the security footage any record of Emily Johnson entering my office. Second, get the best portable coffee maker you can find and leave it on her desk in the cleaning staff's break room with a card signed simply, "Thank you." Third, he hesitated. I want the full report on the accident that killed Anthony Johnson, everything our company has on file. Sir, may I ask? No, John, you may not ask. You can only execute. When he hung up, David remained seated in the dark, watching the city wake up through the window. For the first time in years, he was not anxious to start the workday. He was eager for the next dawn to arrive. April came with that typical melancholy of autumn in Boston, when the mornings start cold and the afternoons still carry the warmth of summer that refuses to leave completely. David had established a routine he never thought possible. He arrived at the office at 6 a.m., an hour earlier than usual, to find Emily finishing her morning ritual. They developed a peculiar dynamic. She prepared the coffee in silence. He pretended to work on his reports, but both were hyper-aware of each other's presence. The conversations started timidly. Comments about the weather, polite questions about work, but gradually evolved into deeper discussions. David discovered that Emily had surprisingly well-founded opinions on sustainable architecture, social urbanization, and corporate responsibility. She, in turn, was astonished that he knew the names of all the doormen, janitors, and security guards in the building, asking about their families with genuine interest. "You're not what I expected from a CEO," she said one Tuesday morning, stirring brown sugar into his coffee with a plastic spoon. "What did you expect? Someone who treats employees like numbers on a spreadsheet." She paused, caressing her belly that was starting to show under her uniform. "My sister always says that rich people only see poor people as statistics." "Your sister might have a point." David tasted the coffee, savoring the perfect blend she had achieved. After weeks of small adjustments, but maybe some of us just need to be reminded that there are real people behind the numbers. It was that morning that everything began to complicate. At 7:30, Sarah walked into the office without knocking, a privilege she had earned after 15 years of impeccable work, and stopped mid-stride, her eyes widening at the sight of Emily sitting in the chair across from David's desk, animatedly discussing the housing project in the East Side. "David?" Sarah's voice came out strange, laden with confusion that she tried to mask with professionalism. "Good morning. I didn't know you had a meeting scheduled." The silence that followed was heavy. Emily immediately stood up, her face flushed with embarrassment. "I'm sorry, Mr. Anderson. I was just leaving." She grabbed the new portable coffee maker that David had provided, a compact yet sophisticated machine from the Swiss brand Jura, and headed for the door. "Emily," David stood up as well. "You don't have to." "I do." She didn't look him in the eye. "Good morning, Miss Sarah." When the door closed behind her, Sarah approached the desk with the expression of someone who had just witnessed a car accident. "David, for God's sake, tell me you're not getting involved with a cleaning staff employee." "Sarah, and pregnant." She pressed her hands against her temples. "David, do you have any idea of the scandal this could cause? Your mother will have a heart attack. The board will question your leadership ability. The shareholders." "She's helping me with the housing project," David lied, hating himself for it. "She has valuable insights into the needs of low-income families." Sarah stared at him for a long moment, then sighed deeply. "David, I've known you since you were a teenager. I know when you're lying." She sat in the chair that Emily had occupied. "What's going on here?" David told the truth, partially. He spoke about the morning coffees, about discovering Emily's identity, about her father who had died on the company's site. He omitted only the intensity of the feelings he was beginning to develop for her. The fact that he was eagerly looking forward to their morning meetings, the way her smile lit up days that had previously been just a mechanical sequence of obligations. "My God," Sarah murmured when he finished. "David, this is a ticking time bomb. If anyone finds out that the daughter of a worker who died on our site is helping you with projects, they will think it's blackmail or compensation or that I'm finally trying to do the right thing. The right thing would be to maintain professional and personal distance." Sarah's voice became firm. "David, I care about you like you're my own son, so I'm going to tell you the truth. You're playing with fire, and it's not just your reputation that's at stake. At risk, it's hers too." Before David could respond, his phone rang. The caller ID displayed a name that made his stomach tighten. Helen Anderson, his mother. "David, dear, good morning." Helen's elegant and controlled voice echoed through the speaker. "I hope you're well. I need to talk to you about something urgent. Can you come home for lunch today?" "Mom, I have a packed schedule." "This is not an invitation, David. It's a summons." Her tone turned icy. "Noon sharp, and bring your appetite. We will have company." The call ended abruptly. David and Sarah exchanged glances. "She knows," Sarah said simply. "How on earth could she know?" "Your mother has eyes and ears everywhere, David. She always has." Helen Anderson, known in Los Angeles social circles as the Admiral due to her absolute control over the family and business, was a force of nature. At 62, widowed for 3 years, she had turned her mourning into a personal crusade to preserve her husband's legacy and ensure that her only son was up to the responsibility he inherited. The Anderson mansion in Beverly Hills was a monument to conservative taste, antique furniture, American art, meticulously maintained gardens that occupied an entire block. David had grown up in those marble corridors, but he had never truly felt at home there. Helen awaited him in the dining room, impeccable as always in a beige linen suit that cost more than the annual salary of 3 employees. Beside her, elegantly arranged, was Jessica Taylor, 30 years old, an architect graduated from UCLA, daughter of one of the city's most traditional families. "David, dear," Helen stood to kiss him on the cheek. "I'm glad you could spare some time for us." "Mum." He greeted Jessica with a kiss on the cheek, ignoring the expensive perfume she wore excessively. "Jessica, what a surprise." "David." Jessica's smile was perfect, neither too warm nor too cold, calculatedly welcoming. "Your mother told me about the housing project. I found it fascinating." During lunch, grilled chicken with organic vegetables served on fine china, Helen guided the conversation with the precision of a conductor. They talked about the real estate market, the latest trends in sustainable architecture, and mutual acquaintances. Jessica proved to be intelligent and articulate, exactly the kind of woman David knew he should admire. "Jessica has some interesting ideas about incorporating contemporary American art into the new developments," Helen said, pouring herself a glass of Chilean white wine. "Perhaps you could have dinner together this week to discuss." "It would be a pleasure," Jessica smiled. "I've always admired your business vision, David." David chewed mechanically, his mind drifting to morning coffees, handwritten notes, and the way Emily spoke about social architecture with a genuine passion that no formal education could teach. "David?" Helen's voice cut through his thoughts. "I asked if you've been eating well. You look tired." "I'm fine, Mom. It's just that some people have told me you've been arriving very early at the office." Helen took a sip of wine, her eyes studying her son. "And that you've been having unusual meetings." There it was, the moment David had dreaded since he woke up. "Mom, if you have something to say, just say it directly." Helen exchanged a look with Jessica, who discreetly excused herself to go to the bathroom. "David," Helen leaned forward, her voice low but sharp as a blade. "I've been told that you are regularly meeting with a cleaning staff member. Pregnant. Who told you that? That doesn't matter. What matters is that you stop immediately." Her voice grew even colder. "David, you are the president of a billion-dollar company. You cannot afford to be seen socializing with that kind of person. That kind of person. You know very well what I mean." Helen leaned back in her chair, assuming her commanding posture. "An opportunist who is certainly taking advantage of your goodwill. Probably trying to get money, or a better position, or... She is not like that. How can you be sure?" Helen laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "David, you are a smart man in business, but you've always been naive when it comes to people, especially women. Mom, don't mom me." Helen slammed her hand on the table, making the crystal glasses clink. "Your father built this empire from scratch. I helped preserve it after his death. I will not allow you to destroy it because of an affair with a... Be careful with the next word that comes out of your mouth." David's cold tone made Helen stop mid-sentence. Mother and son stared at each other for a tense moment, two strong wills colliding like tectonic plates. "David," Helen spoke more softly, but no less determined, "I'm trying to protect you and our family. If you can't see the danger in this situation, perhaps it's time we reconsider your position in the company." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm being realistic." Helen stood up, smoothing her linen suit. "You have a fortune of $3 billion to protect. You have responsibilities to shareholders, employees, and society. You cannot afford to be romantic." Jessica returned at that moment, immediately sensing the tension in the air. "Maybe I should leave," she said delicately. "You don't need to." David stood up as well. "I'm the one leaving." "David Anderson," Helen rarely shouted, but her voice echoed through the dining room. "If you leave now, without resolving this situation, you will regret it." David paused at the door, not turning around. "The only thing I regret, Mom, is taking so long to realize that there is life beyond this gilded cage that you all built around me." He left, leaving Helen and Jessica in silence, driving through the streets of Los Angeles with a cold fury he hadn't felt in years. When he arrived at the office, it was almost 4 p.m., and he knew that Emily had left a long time ago. But in the middle of his desk, where his morning coffee cup always sat, there was a note. "I heard you had a tough day. Remember, storms pass, but who we are in the midst of them is what truly matters. See you tomorrow. I." David sat heavily in his chair, holding the paper between his fingers. For the first time in his adult life, he was absolutely certain of one thing. It didn't matter what his mother, society, or the corporate world thought. He would not let Emily go. June arrived with an unexpected proposal. During the monthly human resources meeting, Sarah, the HR director, suggested something that made David raise his eyebrows: a corporate summer festival in Central Park for all employees, from executives to the cleaning staff. "It's an opportunity for integration," Sarah explained, consulting her notes. "Research shows that employees who feel part of a corporate family are 40% more productive. Plus, it would be an excellent opportunity for public relations." David, who would normally delegate the organization of social events to others, surprised everyone by volunteering to personally oversee the preparations. Emily, who knew him too well, shot him a suspicious glance that he pretended not to notice. The festival was set for Saturday, June 24th, the day of St. John. David spent the previous 2 weeks immersed in the details with a dedication that intrigued everyone around him. He insisted on hiring local vendors from the greater Boston area, approved a menu that included hot apple cider made with artisanal Massachusetts apples, and even personally chose the band that would play throughout the afternoon. Since when do you care if the peanut brittle is made with roasted or raw peanuts? Emily asked one Thursday, finding David tasting samples of traditional sweets in his office. Since I realized that details make the difference, he replied, trying a piece of peanut brittle. Besides, if we're going to have a summer festival, let it be a real summer festival. What he didn't tell Emily was that he had spent hours researching Massachusetts traditions, wanting to create an atmosphere that made Emily feel at home. He had discovered that she was from Springfield, the same hometown as famous figures, known for its coffee and the warm hospitality of its people. On the day of the festival, Central Park was transformed. Colorful banners stretched between the century-old trees, wooden stalls offered typical delicacies, and the smell of roasted corn mingled with the aroma of steaming hot apple cider. A decorative bonfire, supervised by the fire department, crackled in the center of the main area, surrounded by bales of hay serving as makeshift seating. David arrived wearing a blue plaid shirt and jeans, the most casual outfit he owned. Feeling slightly ridiculous, but determined to genuinely participate in the festival. He greeted the employees who had already arrived, noticing with satisfaction that the corporate hierarchy seemed to have temporarily dissolved in the relaxed atmosphere. At 3 p.m., when the festival was in full swing, he saw her. Emily had just arrived, accompanied by a tall, elegant young woman whom David immediately recognized as her sister Lily. The two women contrasted interestingly. Emily, 6.5 months pregnant, wore a floral cotton dress that accentuated her pronounced belly, her loose hair framing her flushed face from the heat. Lily, a future doctor, had the confident posture of someone who knew exactly who she was and where she wanted to go in life. "Isa," Sarah approached the sisters with a genuine smile. "I'm so glad you came. And you brought your famous sister." "Famous?" David stepped closer to the group, pretending to be casual. "Lily is one of the best medical students at Boston University," Sarah explained. "Full scholarship, excellent grades. Emily talks about her all the time." "Nice to meet you." David extended his hand to Lily, who shook it firmly with an evaluative look that made him feel like a specimen being studied. "So you're the famous David Anderson," Lily said, her voice carrying a more pronounced Massachusetts accent than Emily's. "My sister talks a lot about you." "Talks?" David shot a glance at Emily, who blushed intensely. "Lily, stop!" Emily murmured, clearly embarrassed. "Oh, come on, you can talk," Lily laughed, revealing a mischievous smile identical to her sister's. "She comes home every morning, talking about the coffee she made, how you like the notes, how you both discuss the company projects." "Lily!" "All right." Lily raised her hands in surrender. "I'm going to get some hot apple cider and let you two talk about projects." The ironic tone did not go unnoticed by anyone. As Lily walked away, David and Emily were left in a slightly awkward silence. "Your sister is direct," David commented. "She doesn't hold back," Emily laughed. "It's a family trait. Our father always said that people from Massachusetts don't say much, but when they do, it's the truth. And is she right? Do you talk about me at home?" Emily looked at him for a moment, then turned her gaze to the bonfire. "Sometimes." "What do you say?" "That you are different from what I expected." She unconsciously stroked her belly. "That you are more human." Before David could respond, they were interrupted by Joachim, the accordion player hired for the festival, who began to play "Take Me Home, Country Roads," with a melancholy that made several people stop to listen. The afternoon sun filtered through the eucalyptus leaves, creating a play of light and shadow that gave the atmosphere an almost magical air. "Want to sit for a bit?" David gestured to some bales of hay near the bonfire. They sat side by side, watching the employees' families enjoying themselves. Children ran between the stalls, Couples danced to the sound of the accordion, and the aroma of homemade peanut brittle wafted through the air. "You know," Emily said softly, "it's been a long time since I've seen so many happy people together." "You don't seem happy very often." She thought about the question for a moment. "I don't think I've learned to find happiness. In small moments, a well-made cup of coffee, a kind note, a good conversation." She glanced at him. "Sometimes I forget what it's like to be in a place where everyone can just be happy." David felt a tightness in his chest. "And you? When was the last time you were just happy?" "Honestly," Emily smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes. "I think it was at Lily's high school graduation. Seeing her get the scholarship, knowing she would have opportunities I never had. In that moment, all the struggle was worth it. You sacrificed a lot for her." "It wasn't a sacrifice," Emily shook her head. "It was an investment. She's going to be a doctor. She's going to help people. She's going to have a life she chose. That's all I've ever wanted." "And what do you want for yourself?" The question caught Emily off guard. She fell silent for a long moment, watching the flames of the fire dance. "I never thought much about it," she finally admitted. "It was always about surviving, about taking care of Lily, about making it to the end of the month, now that the baby is coming." She paused. "I just want to be a good mother, to give my child the opportunities I never had." "That's not all you want." "How can you know?" David turned to face her fully. "Because when you talk about architecture, your eyes light up. When you discuss sustainability or social projects, you get excited in a way you don't when talking about cleaning. You have ideas, Emily, brilliant ideas. Ideas don't pay the bills. Some do." Before she could respond, Lily appeared carrying 3 cups of hot apple cider and accompanied by a tall, friendly young man. She introduced as Diego, her boyfriend and medical school classmate. "You two look too serious for a summer festival," Lily remarked, handing out the cups. "Are you discussing work again?" "Actually," David said, an idea forming in his mind, "we were talking about opportunities." "What kind of opportunities?" Diego asked, genuinely interested. David looked at Emily, who was watching him with a curious expression. "Our company is developing a new social responsibility program. Affordable housing projects focusing on sustainability and community integration." He paused. "We're looking for someone with practical knowledge about the needs of low-income families and a vision for innovative architectural solutions." "Sounds interesting," Diego commented. "Do you know anyone like that?" "I'm looking at her," David said, his eyes fixed on Emily. The silence that followed was broken by the sound of an accordion playing "Take Me Home," but no one in the group was paying attention to the music. "David," Emily said softly, "you can't be serious." "Why not?" "Because I clean buildings. I don't know anything about social programs or—" "You know more than anyone with an MBA I've ever met," David interrupted her. "You know because you've lived the struggles these programs aim to solve. You know what works and what doesn't because you've experienced it." Lily was watching the exchange with wide eyes. "Emily, is he offering you a job?" "I'm offering an opportunity," David corrected. "A position in the social projects department. Salary 3 times higher than your current one, full health benefits, extended maternity leave." Emily stared at him as if he had lost his mind. "David, people are going to think that I finally made a smart decision. That you're doing me a favor because I recognize talent where others only see limitations." David leaned forward. "Emily, you have a gift for understanding human needs and turning them into practical solutions. That's exactly what we need. But I don't have training. The company can provide additional courses: social architecture, project management, sustainability." David was speaking quickly now, excited by his own ideas. "You would learn on the job, with mentors, with real experience. Lily clapped her hands, making everyone look at her. "Sorry, but this is amazing. Emily, you can't be thinking of turning it down." Emily looked lost, alternating her gaze between David and her sister. "It's so sudden. I need to think." "Of course," David nodded. "Take as long as you need." "But Emily," he gently took her hand, "sometimes life offers us bridges to places we've always dreamed of going, but never believed were possible. The question is whether we have the courage to cross them." In that moment, with the smell of hot apple cider in the air, the sound of the accordion echoing among the trees, and David's hand enveloping hers, Emily felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Pure and true hope. "Can I give you an answer on Monday?" "You can give your answer whenever you feel ready," David smiled. "But know that regardless of your decision, you've already changed my perspective on many things." "How so?" "You've taught me that sometimes the best ideas don't come from boardrooms or financial reports. They come from people who know what it means to truly need." As the afternoon progressed and the festival continued around them, the four young people remained engaged in conversation about dreams, possibilities, and futures that seemed, for the first time in a long time, within reach. And when Jake began to play Waiting by the Window, David was certain that this summer festival had changed not just the day, but the course of their lives. Monday arrived shrouded in the typical winter fog of Los Angeles, that cold humidity that seeps into your bones and makes the whole city move slower. David arrived at the office at 6 a.m. sharp, an hour earlier than planned, too anxious to wait at home for Emily's response. When she appeared at 6:45, carrying a portable coffee maker and a determined expression he hadn't seen before, David felt his stomach tighten with anticipation. "Good morning," she said, starting her morning ritual with more deliberate movements than usual. "Good morning. Did you sleep well?" "No." Emily laughed nervously, measuring the coffee grounds with surgical precision. "I spent the whole night thinking about your proposal." David remained silent, watching her work. Her fingers. Emily's hands trembled slightly. Whether from anxiety or cold, she couldn't determine. The familiar aroma of coffee began to fill the room, but this time it carried a different tension, as if the future of both depended on the next few minutes. "David." Emily placed the cup on the table and sat in the armchair across from him, her hands clasped over her growing belly. "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me." "Go ahead." "Why are you doing this?" Her brown eyes studied him intensely. "Don't tell me it's just because you recognize my talent. There are hundreds of qualified people you could hire." David leaned back in his chair, knowing the moment of truth had arrived. "Do you want the politically correct answer or the true answer?" "The true one." "The truth is..." He hesitated, searching for the right words. "You reminded me why I chose architecture when I was a child. It wasn't for the buildings, it was for the people who would live in them." David stood up, walking to the window. "You made me question things I accepted as normal. You made me want to be better. That doesn't justify..." "And also," he turned to face her, "because for the past 3 months, you have become the best part of my days. Because when I wake up in the morning, I don't think about the meetings or reports waiting for me. I think about the coffee you will make and the conversations we will have." The silence that followed was filled only by the low hum of the central heating. Emily studied his face, as if trying to detect signs of deceit. "David," she finally said, her voice low, "I accept the job, but with conditions." "What conditions?" "First, I want to start slow. Part-time for the first few months to adjust. Second, if I can't meet expectations, I leave without drama. Third," she took a deep breath, "this cannot affect our friendship. If it doesn't work out professionally, I don't want it to ruin what we've built." "I accept all the conditions." David smiled, feeling a lightness in his chest that he hadn't experienced in years. "When can you start?" "Today, if you want." "Today?" Emily laughed, a musical sound that filled the room. "David, I've been working since I was 16. I'm not afraid of change. I'm afraid of standing still." That's how, 3 hours later, David found himself walking through the company's hallways, accompanied by Emily, now wearing a simple yet elegant business suit that Lily had lent her, introducing her to the social projects department as the new consultant specializing in affordable housing needs. The reaction was mixed. Martha Thompson from HR received the news with cautious professionalism. The engineers in the department showed genuine curiosity about Emily's perspectives. But it was Veronica Smith, the director of social projects, who created the first significant obstacle. Veronica was a 42-year-old woman, an architect trained at UCLA with a specialization in urban planning from Harvard. Elegant, competent, and ambitious, she had built her career through a combination of genuine talent and strategic networking, and everyone knew she had been engaged to David 5 years prior. "David," Veronica called him for a private conversation after Emily's introduction, "I need to talk to you about this decision." They met in the conference room on the 30th floor with a panoramic view of the river. Veronica closed the door with more force than necessary. "Have you lost your mind?" She got straight to the point. "Hiring a pregnant cleaning lady to work on social projects? David, this is going to become a scandal." "She's not just a cleaning lady, Veronica. She has valuable insights." "Insights?" Veronica laughed, but there was no humor in her laughter. "David, I have 15 years of experience in social architecture. I've worked in low-income neighborhoods, housing projects, urbanization initiatives. I know what I'm talking about when I say that life experience doesn't replace technical training. No one is saying it replaces it, but it complements it." Veronica stepped closer to him, lowering her voice. "David, I've known you for over 10 years. I know when you're thinking with your head and when you're thinking with other parts of your body." "Veronica, she's beautiful, in a vulnerable situation, and you're feeling like the savior. It's a classic hero complex." Veronica crossed her arms. "But this isn't a fairy tale, David. It's a billion-dollar company with real responsibilities." "You're being unfair." "I'm being realistic." Veronica sighed, her expression softening slightly. "Look, I understand the attraction. A simple, authentic woman, different from the socialites you usually associate with, but think about the consequences. For you, for her, for the company." David studied the face of his ex-fiancée, seeing the mix of genuine concern and disguised jealousy she was trying to hide. "Veronica, are you going to work with her or not?" "I will work with her," Veronica replied after a pause. "But I will treat her like any other new employee. No privileges, no condescension. If she can keep up, great. If not, we'll deal with it when it happens." Over the next 2 weeks, David watched Emily adapt to the new environment with a mix of admiration and concern. She arrived promptly at 8 a.m., stayed until 1 p.m., and absorbed information at an impressive speed. She studied architectural plans as if they were literature, asked questions that revealed an intuitive understanding of complex problems, and offered practical solutions that often surprised the more experienced engineers. But he also noticed the growing tension between Emily and Veronica. "Emily," Veronica said one Thursday afternoon during a project meeting, "your suggestion to include community spaces on the ground floors is interesting. But have you considered the impact on the cost per square foot?" "I have, yes," Emily replied calmly, consulting her notes. "In fact, I researched similar projects in Denver and San Francisco. The initial investment pays off in 3 years through reduced maintenance costs and increased resident satisfaction. Researched where? On the internet, at the public library. I spoke with residents of similar housing projects here in Los Angeles. Emily maintained a professional tone, but David sensed the tension in her voice. I also spoke with social workers who work in these communities. Veronica exchanged a glance with the others present, a look that clearly said, Internet. Research is not scientific methodology. Interesting, she said with a cold smile, but for projects of this magnitude, we need more robust data. It was at that moment that Emily did something that surprised everyone in the room. Instead of defending or justifying herself, she simply nodded. You're right, I can conduct a more structured research. What methodology do you recommend? The question caught Veronica off guard. It was a mature, professional response that showed a willingness to learn rather than defensiveness. Well, we can talk about that after the meeting. When the meeting ended and the others left, David stayed behind to talk to Emily. You did really well, he said. I didn't feel that way. Emily was putting away her notes with precise gestures. I feel like I'm always proving that I deserve to be here. That's normal in any new job. No, David. She looked him directly in the eye. It's different. People look at me and see the pregnant cleaning lady who somehow got a job she doesn't deserve. I see it in their eyes. David felt anger rising in his chest, not at Emily, but at the circumstances that made her question her own worth. Emily, you have more practical knowledge about housing needs than anyone in this building. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Practical knowledge is not the same as technical knowledge. Sometimes it's more important. Emily smiled, but it was a tired smile. You say that because you like me, but I need to prove my worth to others too. Then prove it. How? David thought for a moment, then had an idea. What do you think about visiting some housing projects this weekend? See in practice what works and what doesn't. Would you do that? Of course. And maybe we can invite Veronica too, show that you're willing to learn from her. Emily considered the proposal, unconsciously stroking her belly. At 7 months pregnant, she was starting to tire more easily, but the determination in her eyes remained unwavering. All right. But David, yes? If at any point you realize this isn't working, promise me you'll be honest. I don't want our friendship to suffer because you felt sorry for me. David moved closer to her, stopping at a respectful distance, but close enough for her to see the sincerity in his eyes. Emily, what I feel for you has nothing to do with pity, and our friendship. He hesitated, realizing he was about to cross a line he had been avoiding for weeks. Our friendship has already turned into something more, at least for me. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken possibilities. Emily studied him for a long moment, her eyes revealing a vulnerability she rarely showed. David, she finally said, are you sure you know what you're saying? I am. Because I'm a complicated pregnant woman who comes with emotional baggage and responsibilities you can't even imagine. I know. And you are a wealthy, powerful man who could have any woman he wanted. I don't want any woman. David took a step closer. I want you. Emily closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. When she opened them again, there was a decision in them. Then let's take it slow, because if this goes wrong, it's not just my heart that will be affected. It's my future, my baby's future, and the job that finally gives me hope for a better life. Let's take it slow, David agreed. But let's move forward. And for the first time since they met, they left the room together, side by side, as partners. The winter in Los Angeles remained cold outside, but inside the skyline corporate tower, something had definitely warmed up. August arrived with a biting chill that seemed to penetrate to the bones. But for David, the days had never felt so warm. The routine he and Emily had developed over the past few weeks had created an intimacy that transcended professional barriers. Morning coffee at 6:45 a.m., work meetings that extended into personal conversations, discreet lunches at the cafe on the ground floor where she insisted on splitting the bill. Emily was thriving in her new role. In 3 weeks, she had produced a report on structural deficiencies in existing housing complexes that impressed even the most skeptical engineers. Her methodology was unorthodox: direct conversations with residents, on-site observations, social media research from communities, but the results were undeniably effective. "She has a perspective that we, academics, have lost," commented Robert Miller, a civil engineer with 25 years of experience, after Emily's presentation on natural ventilation in affordable housing. "She sees problems that our studies don't capture." But not everyone shared this opinion. Veronica Smith watched Emily's growing recognition with a mix of forced professionalism and barely concealed irritation. During a meeting on the morning of Tuesday, August 15th, she decided to take action. "David," Veronica knocked on the door of his office at 8:30 a.m. "I need to talk to you about Emily's report on housing sustainability." David looked up from the documents he was reviewing. "What's wrong with the report?" "It has some interesting ideas, but—" Veronica closed the door and sat down, crossing her legs with studied elegance. "It also has several technical inaccuracies, misapplied concepts, inadequate references." "Can you be more specific?" "For example," Veronica opened a folder with meticulous notes. "She suggests the use of green roofs in affordable housing, but doesn't consider the cost of specialized maintenance. Proposes rainwater harvesting systems without calculating the economic feasibility on a large scale." David flipped through Emily's report looking for the points mentioned. "She makes it clear that these are preliminary proposals subject to technical validation." "David, are you defending her because she's objectively good, or because you have feelings for her?" The direct question made David stop pretending he didn't understand the subtext of Veronica's criticisms. "I'm defending her because her ideas have merit." "Merit. They may need technical refinement, but the vision is solid." "Solid?" Veronica laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "David, I have a master's degree in sustainable urbanism. I've worked with social housing in 3 different countries. I know how to recognize technical competence when I see it. And I know how to recognize jealousy when I see it." The silence that followed was tense as the string of a violin about to snap. Veronica quickly composed herself, but David had seen the flash of raw anger in her eyes. "It's not jealousy, David. It's professional concern." Her voice turned cold, controlled. "But since you mentioned our personal history, I'll be direct. You're making the same mistake you made with us." "What mistake?" "Confusing physical attraction with real compatibility." Veronica leaned forward. "You fall in love with the idea of saving someone, of being the hero of the story. You did that with me when I was a newly graduated architect trying to break into the market. You're doing it again with her." David felt a pang of discomfort because there was a grain of truth in Veronica's words, but just a grain. "The difference," he said calmly, "is that Emily doesn't need to be saved. She needs opportunities, and I can offer that. For now, but what happens when the novelty wears off, when you tire of playing Pygmalion?" Veronica stood up, smoothing her skirt. "David, I've known you for 10 years. I know how you operate in relationships, and I know that in the end, you always choose what's best for business." "Veronica." "No, let me finish." She headed for the door but paused with her hand on the doorknob. Emily is a good person. She doesn't deserve to be discarded when you find out that love doesn't resolve fundamental incompatibilities of class, education, and life perspectives. After Veronica left, David remained seated in his chair, troubled by her words, not because he completely believed them, but because she had touched on insecurities he had been trying to ignore. It was true that there was a pattern in his previous relationships. Independent women, professionally ambitious, whom he initially admired but eventually found predictable. With Emily, it was different. But would it be different enough to overcome the obvious barriers between them? His thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Emily entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee and a smile that immediately dispelled his doubts. "I brought coffee for us," she said, placing a cup on his desk. "I thought you might need it after your meeting with Veronica. She didn't seem very happy when she left." "How do you know she was here?" "She passes through my department to get to her private elevator, and—" Emily hesitated. "She said some things to Robert about my report, nothing serious, but she made it clear she thinks my ideas are inadequate." David felt anger rising in his chest. "What kind of things?" "David, it doesn't matter." Emily sat down, stroking her 8-month belly that now dominated her silhouette. "She has a point in some areas. I need to improve my technical foundation." "Your ideas are brilliant. Brilliant ideas poorly executed are just dreams." Emily took a sip of the coffee, grimacing. "Sorry, the coffee is terrible today. I think I'm losing my taste with the pregnancy." "Emily, you can't let Veronica discourage you." "I'm not discouraged. I'm being realistic." She looked him directly in the eye. "David, I know you believe in me and that means everything, but I need to prove my worth to others too. And that I need to study more, to refine my skills." "How?" "I was thinking of enrolling in a specialization course in social architecture, at night, after work." She paused. "I know it will be difficult with the baby coming, but—" "Emily, you don't need to prove yourself to anyone." "I do." Her voice became firm. "And do you know why? Because when people look at me, they see the cleaning lady who became a consultant overnight. They think it was a favor, not merit. And in part, they're right. That's not true." "Yes, it is." Emily stood up, walking to the window. August was particularly grey, with low clouds that made the city look like a noir film. "David, you gave me this opportunity because you care about me. That's beautiful, but it's also problematic." "Why?" "Because it mixes personal feelings with professional decisions." She turned to face him. "And that can harm both of us." David moved closer to her, stopping just close enough to smell the light perfume she wore. Something simple, floral, completely different from the strong fragrances he was used to. "Emily, my feelings for you do not negate my recognition of your talent." "How can you be sure?" The question was simple, but the answer was complex. How could he separate the attraction he felt for her from professional admiration? How could he be sure he wasn't, as Veronica suggested, confusing the desire to protect with genuine recognition of competence? "Because," he finally said, "your ideas work. Regardless of how I feel about you, the work you produce is effective." "For now." Emily sat back down, the fatigue of pregnancy evident in her movements. "But David, what happens when I make a big mistake, when I fail at some important project? Will you be able to critique me objectively, or will you try to protect me?" The question was too insightful to ignore. David knew she was right. His feelings for her complicated everything. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've never been in this situation before." "Then let's set some rules," Emily said pragmatically. "At work, we are colleagues. Hierarchically, you are my boss, but professionally, I need the freedom to make mistakes and learn from them." "And outside of work?" Emily smiled, and for a moment all the professional tension disappeared. Outside of work, you can keep bringing me coffee and telling me about your grand plans to transform the real estate market. Grand plans? David, you want to build entire sustainable cities. If that's not grand, I don't know what is." They laughed together, and David felt the lightness return. Perhaps Veronica was right about some things, but he was wrong about one. What he felt for Emily was not the desire to save her. It was the desire to build something together with her. "So," he said, "let's try to keep things separate. Professional at work, personal outside of it. Can you manage that? I can try. And what if you can't?" David considered the question seriously. "Then we'll have to re-evaluate everything." "Okay." Emily stood up, extending her hand formally. "Deal made." David shook her hand, feeling the softness of her skin and the firmness of the grip. Deal made. But as she left his office, David knew it would be harder than they both imagined. Because how can someone separate personal feelings from professional recognition when the person at the center of both feelings is pregnant, vulnerable, and represents everything you've always wanted to protect and nurture? The answer would come sooner than he expected. September brought with it the promise of spring in Los Angeles, with the first yellow ivy trees beginning to bloom shyly along the city avenues. For David, the season symbolized renewal, both professionally and personally. Emily, now 8.5 months pregnant, had become a key player in the social projects department, and his relationship with her was evolving carefully within the boundaries they had established. But it was on a sunny Thursday morning, September 21st, that the carefully constructed world they had built began to crumble. David was in his office, reviewing the final proposals for the housing project, Hope Village, a set of 500 units in the East Side that would be the company's first venture to fully implement Emily's suggestions on sustainability and community integration. The project represented not only a professional milestone, but also tangible proof that their partnership was working. At 10:30 a.m., Mark from security knocked on his door with a worried expression. "Mr. Anderson, I need to speak with you. It's about the Hope Village project." "What about the project?" Mark closed the door behind him, clearly uncomfortable. "Last night, during routine rounds, I caught Ms. Veronica Smith in the office after hours. She was photographing documents." David felt a chill in his stomach. "What kind of documents?" "I couldn't see clearly, but she was at Emily's desk, photographing papers with her phone." "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. I even recorded a video when I noticed something was off." Mark handed over his phone. "Sorry for the image quality, but you can see clearly." The video showed Veronica, alone in the social projects office at 11:15 p.m., methodically photographing documents spread out on Emily's desk. Her actions were deliberate, organized, clearly not the first time she had done this. "Mark, I need you. Not to mention this to anyone for now. I'll investigate." "Of course, sir, but I thought you should know immediately." After Mark left, David remained seated, processing the betrayal. Veronica was not just criticizing Emily's work. She was actively sabotaging it. The question was, why? And more importantly, what did she intend to do with that information? The answer came sooner than expected. The following Monday, David was called to an emergency meeting of the board of directors. When he entered the conference room on the 35th floor, he found all the board members present, something that only happened in situations of extreme gravity. "David," greeted Dr. Henry Palmer, the chairman and a close friend of his late father, "please have a seat." The formal tone made David immediately alert. Dr. Palmer, usually warm and paternal, was serious as a judge about to deliver a sentence. "We've received some concerning information about the Hope Village project," Dr. Palmer continued, "specifically regarding irregularities in the development process." "What kind of irregularities?" Helen Anderson, impeccable as always in a navy blue suit, replied, "Irregularities related to intellectual property theft." David felt his blood run cold. "Theft?" Dr. Palmer opened a thick folder on the table. We've received an anonymous tip that the Hope Village project contains concepts and architectural solutions identical to an academic study developed by architect Veronica Smith in 2018 during her specialization abroad. That's absurd. Is it? Helen pulled out a series of printed documents from the folder. These are side-by-side comparisons between the proposals presented by Emily Johnson and Veronica's academic work. The similarities are notable. David examined the documents with growing indignation. They were indeed similar. Concepts of natural ventilation, arrangement of community areas, rainwater harvesting systems. But he knew that Emily had developed these ideas through her own research and observations. There are perfectly plausible explanations for these similarities, David said, trying to keep his voice steady. Functional solutions tend to converge. David, Dr. Palmer gently interrupted, the tip also includes copies of emails between you and Emily discussing specific aspects of the project, emails that show she had access to Veronica's work. What emails? Helen slid a series of printouts across the table. David examined them with increasing horror. They were real conversations between him and Emily, but edited to suggest that she had deliberately copied Veronica's work. This has been manipulated, David said immediately. Perhaps, Dr. Palmer nodded, but the fact remains, we have evidence that intellectual property may have been violated, and this exposes the company to significant legal risks. Dr. Palmer, Emily wouldn't do this. David, Helen's voice became firm. Are you defending her as the president of the company or as something more? The question hung in the air like a bomb about to explode. David realized he was at a crossroads. Defending Emily would mean publicly exposing his feelings for her, validating all suspicions of personal favoritism. I'm defending her as someone who knows her work and her integrity. Her integrity? Helen laughed, a cold sound. David, she's a cleaning lady who suddenly became a specialized consultant. Do you really believe she developed these complex ideas on her own? I do, yes. Dr. Palmer sighed deeply. David, we respect you as the leader of this company. But this situation is creating an embarrassment that goes beyond the professional. We are receiving calls from journalists, speculation in the market. Journalists? The complaint has also been sent to the press, Helen explained, with barely concealed satisfaction. Some outlets are already investigating the story. Billionaire CEO promotes pregnant cleaning lady to executive position is a headline that sells. David felt the world spinning around him. It wasn't just about plagiarism. It was a coordinated attack designed to destroy both his reputation and Emily's. What are you proposing? Dr. Palmer exchanged glances with the other advisors before responding. Immediate suspension of Emily Johnson pending a complete investigation. Comprehensive review of the Hope Village project. And, he hesitated, it may be appropriate for you to consider stepping back temporarily from the company's operational leadership. Step back? Until this situation is resolved, Helen quickly added. It's just to protect the company's reputation. David slowly stood up, his mind processing the magnitude of the betrayal. Veronica hadn't just stolen Emily's work, she had orchestrated an entire campaign to destroy both of them. I need to talk to Emily before making any decision. David, Dr. Palmer began, it's not negotiable. His voice came out colder than he intended. Emily deserves to know what's happening before you take any action. When David left the conference room, his first stop was the Social Projects Department. He found Emily at her desk, reviewing architectural plans with her usual focus, one hand resting on her pronounced belly. Emily, I need to talk to you. Something in his tone made her look up immediately. What happened? Not here. Let's go to my office. As they walked down the hallway, David noticed the looks from the other employees. Some curious, others clearly uncomfortable. The news was already spreading. In his office, with the door closed, David told her everything. The complaint, the plagiarism accusations, the manipulated evidence, the pressure from the board. He watched Emily's face go through confusion, indignation, and finally a resignation that broke his heart. "So that's it," she said when he finished. "It was only a matter of time. Emily, we will fight this. We will prove that." "David." Her voice was tired but firm. "Stop." "What do you mean, stop?" Emily struggled to her feet, walking to the window. The spring outside seemed to mock them with its beauty, a cruel irony given the devastation happening inside. "From day one, I knew this could happen. People like me don't rise, and people like her don't take down people like Veronica without consequences. You didn't do anything wrong." "I know I didn't." She turned to face him, tears shining in her eyes but not falling. "But sometimes, David, it doesn't matter if you did something wrong. What matters is if people believe you did." "So, you're going to give up?" "I will accept the suspension, cooperate with the investigation, and prove my innocence through the appropriate channels." Her voice grew stronger. "And you will step back from this situation." "Emily, David, listen." She stepped closer to him, placing a hand on his arm. "I told you from the beginning that this could complicate everything. Now it has. If you keep defending me, you will destroy your career, and that won't help me." "And what if I don't care about my career?" Emily smiled, a sad but genuine smile. "Then you would be a fool, and I fell in love with you precisely because you are not a fool." The confession hung between them like a final revelation. Amid the chaos and betrayal, she had finally admitted her feelings. "Emily, no." She shook her head. "Not now. Right now you need to be the president of the company, and I need to be the suspended employee who will prove my innocence. And then..." Emily caressed her belly, where their child, because David had already decided it would be his child too, biological or not, was growing stronger every day. "Then we see if there's still something between us beyond scandal and complication." When Emily left his office for the last time as an active employee, David remained at the window, watching the city that suddenly seemed hostile and cold. Somewhere out there, Veronica was celebrating her victory. But she had made one crucial mistake. She had underestimated both of them. October brought to Los Angeles that typical restlessness of spring when the city can't decide between scorching heat and torrential rain, alternating between the two moods with the volatility of a lovesick teenager. For David, the climatic instability was the perfect reflection of his personal and professional life, which had turned into an emotional roller coaster since Emily's suspension 2 weeks earlier. He had followed her advice, temporarily. He kept a public distance, cooperated with the internal investigation, allowed the company to hire an external audit to examine the plagiarism accusations. But privately, David was conducting his own investigation, and the results were starting to paint a very different picture from what Veronica had presented. The first clue came from Robert Miller, the experienced engineer who had always admired Emily's work. "David," he said in a discreet conversation in the company parking lot, "there's something you need to know about Veronica's academic work from 2018. "What?" "I spoke with a colleague from UCLA who was in the same specialization program as her in San Francisco. According to him, her project was developed in a group, not individually. And the person who led the housing sustainability part was..." Robert paused dramatically. "The supervising professor, not her." David felt a pang of hope. "Do you have proof of this?" "Better than that. I have the professor's contact. He's still in San Francisco and remembers the project very well. Apparently, Veronica appropriated several ideas that weren't originally hers. The second clue came from an even more unexpected source: Lily, Emily's sister. She showed up at David's office on a rainy afternoon, without an appointment, convincing Sarah that it was an emergency. When he entered his office, David was impressed by the transformation of the young medical student. There was a hardness in her eyes that he had never seen before. "Dr. Anderson," she said formally, refusing the invitation to sit down, "I came here against my sister's wishes. Lily, if this is about the suspension, it's about much more than that." She pulled a brown envelope from her bag. "My sister doesn't know I'm here, and if she finds out, she'll kill me. But I can't stay quiet watching her be destroyed by a lie." David took the envelope, feeling the considerable weight of its contents. "What is this?" "Evidence. Documents, emails, records that show Veronica Smith has been planning this for months." Lily finally sat down but maintained a rigid posture. "Dr. Anderson, my sister may be naive in things, but she is the most honest person I know. She would never steal someone else's work." David opened the envelope, finding dozens of printed pages, screenshots of emails, phone call records, even transcripts of conversations. "How did you get this?" Lily smiled for the first time, a smile that vaguely resembled Emily's, but with an aggression that the older sister had never shown. "I have a boyfriend who is a medical student, but supports his studies by working in information technology. He has specific skills." She paused. "And I have a college colleague who interns at the law firm that Veronica hired to sue the company for misappropriating her ideas." "Is she suing the company?" "She is going to sue. Her plan is not just to destroy my sister, it's also to position herself as the true creator of the ideas for the Hope Village project, and then sue for a multi-million-dollar settlement." David examined the documents with growing indignation. There were emails between Veronica and a journalist specializing in corporate scandals, conversations with a private investigator hired to find evidence of favoritism, even a draft of the lawsuit she intended to file. "My God," he murmured, "this is a complete conspiracy." "It is. And it works because people are already predisposed to believe that a cleaning lady cannot have brilliant ideas, but a qualified architect can." Lily leaned forward. "Dr. Anderson, my sister is at home, 9 months pregnant, blaming herself for ruining her career. She cries every night, not because of the humiliation, but because she thinks she has harmed you." "She hasn't harmed anyone." "I know that. You know that. But what about the rest of the world?" Lily gestured to the documents. "This evidence can clear her name, but it needs to be used the right way, by someone with enough power to make the truth heard." David studied the young woman in front of him, seeing for the first time the strength that ran in the Johnson family. Emily had raised this determined, intelligent, and fiercely loyal woman on her own. "What are you asking for exactly?" "To fight for her, not as a lover, but as the company president. Use your power, your resources, your influence." Lily stood up. "Because if you don't do this, it's not just her professional future that's at stake. It's the future of the baby too. And she doesn't deserve to raise another child alone because of the malice of others." After Lily left, David spent hours studying the documents, connecting the dots, understanding the extent of Veronica's betrayal. It was not just envy or jealousy. It was a calculated plan to benefit financially at Emily's and the company's expense. The next morning, he called an emergency meeting. But this time, it wouldn't be with the board of directors. It would be with the press. The press conference was scheduled for Thursday, October 26th, in the company auditorium. David had spent 3 days meticulously preparing his presentation, organizing the evidence, consulting attorneys, specializing in intellectual property. When he entered the auditorium at 10 a.m., he found more journalists than he had expected. The story had gained national traction, becoming a symbol of everything that was wrong with corporate elitism in America. "Ladies and gentlemen of the press," David began, his voice firm and controlled, "I have called this conference to definitively clarify the accusations related to the Hope Village project and employee Emily Johnson." He spent the next hour methodically dismantling the accusations against Emily, presenting the evidence that Lily had provided, the testimonies from the professor in San Francisco, the contradictions in Veronica's academic work. "The real victims here," David said, looking directly into the cameras, "are professional integrity and social justice. Emily Johnson is not only innocent of the accusations against her, she is also the true creator of the innovations being questioned." The inevitable question came from Monica Harris, an investigative journalist from the Los Angeles Times. "Mr. Anderson, don't you think your passionate defense of Ms. Johnson compromises your objectivity? After all, the rumors about your personal relationship are well known." David had prepared for this question, but still felt his heart race. "Ms. Harris, my personal feelings for Ms. Johnson do not alter the technical and legal facts I presented today. And yes, I publicly confirm that I have fallen in love with her. I fell in love with her intelligence, her integrity, her determination to overcome barriers that society insists on placing in her way." The silence in the auditorium was complete. David continued, "But more important than my feelings is the principle at stake here. If we allow talent to be disqualified just because of social origin, if we accept that competence can be questioned just because of a lack of a diploma, we will be perpetuating a system that wastes human resources and punishes innovation." "What about Ms. Veronica Smith?" another journalist asked. "The evidence I presented today has been forwarded to the appropriate authorities. Ms. Smith will have the opportunity to defend herself through the proper channels." David paused. "But I will no longer allow employees of this company to be persecuted for personal motivations disguised as professional concern." When the conference ended, David, I knew I had burned all my bridges. I would either come out stronger from this crisis or lose everything. There was no middle ground. The answer came faster than I expected. That very afternoon, Veronica was fired for cause. The next morning, 3 major competing construction companies reached out offering partnerships for projects similar to Hope Village. In the afternoon, the Los Angeles Times published an editorial praising the business courage to recognize talent beyond diplomas. But the call that David had been waiting for took 3 days to arrive. "David?" Lily's voice on the phone sounded tired, but there was something different about it. A lightness that hadn't existed for weeks. "Lily, how are you?" "Pregnant, suspended, and completely in love with an idiot who risked his career to defend my honor." David laughed, feeling an enormous weight lift off his shoulders. "He just risked. I thought he had completely ruined it." "Well, about that." He could hear the smile in her voice. "I just got a call from Martha in HR. Apparently, I'm being promoted to Associate Director of Social Projects with a salary increase and my own team." "And what did you say?" "That I accept, with one condition." "What?" "That my immediate boss personally brings me the official news, with coffee and homemade cinnamon rolls. I can be there in 20 minutes. "David?" "Yes?" "Also bring a good explanation for how you plan to balance being my boss and my whatever we are. I have some ideas about that." "I bet you do." When David hung up the phone, for the first time in weeks, he felt truly happy. The spring outside finally seemed to have decided its mood, and it was definitely optimistic. February arrived with the scorching heat that only Los Angeles knew how to produce, a temperature that made the asphalt feel like lava and turned any walk into a marathon. But for David, who was rushing through the halls of St. Mary's Hospital at 2:30 p.m. on a Tuesday, February 20th, neither the heat nor the hospital's cold air conditioning could diminish the fire of anxiety and joy burning in his chest. "She's in room 312, the nurse at the desk informed, smiling at the clearly desperate man who had rushed in, still wearing a wrinkled suit and carrying a bouquet of sunflowers he had bought from a vendor at the hospital entrance. David had received the call from Lily at 6 a.m. "The contractions have started. We're going to the hospital. She asked not to call you yet, but I think you should be here." He had cancelled all his meetings for the day, including an important presentation for international investors, left the company in Claudia's care, and drove like a madman through the city until he reached the hospital. In the last 4 months since the resolution of the scandal with Veronica, David and Emily had built something neither of them could fully define. It wasn't a traditional relationship. The professional complexities and social differences still existed, but it was real, solid, based on mutual respect, genuine admiration, and yes, true love. Emily had established herself as one of the most respected professionals in the company. The Hope Village project had become a national model for sustainable housing, generating invitations for lectures, consulting, and even a proposal to write a book on participatory social architecture. David had learned to separate the roles of boss and partner with a skill that surprised them both. At work, she was Dr. Emily Johnson, Director of Social Projects. At home, because yes, she had moved into an apartment in the same building as him, she was simply Emily, the woman who made the best coffee in Los Angeles and could make him laugh even at his own corporate neuroses. When David reached the door of room 312, he paused for a moment to compose himself. Through the glass, he could see Emily in bed, visibly exhausted but radiant, holding 2 small bundles against her chest. Lily was sitting in an armchair beside her, taking pictures with her phone and wiping tears of joy. "You can go in," said a nurse coming out of the room. "She's been waiting for you." David entered slowly, as if stepping into a sacred temple. Emily looked up when she saw him, and her smile was so bright that he felt his heart stop for a second. "Hi," she said softly. "You came." "Of course I came." He approached the bed, placing the sunflowers on the side table. "How are you?" "Tired, sore, incredibly happy." Emily adjusted the babies in her arms. "David, do you want to meet your children?" The word "your" hit him like a lightning bolt. In recent months they had talked about the future, about responsibilities, about what it would be like when the babies arrived. But hearing Emily refer to the children as "your kids" made everything real in a way that left him speechless. "Can I?" "Of course." Emily extended one of the bundles. "This is Michael. He was born first at 11:47 a.m. Very determined, this one. Didn't want to wait even 5 more minutes." David took the baby with the care of someone handling the most precious thing in the universe. Michael was perfect, small, with tufts of dark hair and eyes that opened to stare at him with the seriousness of an executive evaluating a financial report. "Hi, Michael," David whispered, feeling tears welling up in his eyes. "I'm David. I will take care of you for the rest of my life." "And this," Emily said, kissing the forehead of the second baby, "is Sophia. She arrived 5 minutes later, but she already shows her own personality. She cried louder than her brother." David sat on the edge of the bed, balancing Michael while admiring Sophia. The babies were clearly twins, but each already showed individual characteristics. Michael seemed contemplative, Sophia more expressive. "They are perfect," he said, his voice choked. "They are, indeed." Emily watched, him with a tenderness that made his chest ache with love. "David, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me." "You can ask. Are you sure you want this? Not just today, in the heat of the moment, but every day for the next 20 years. Sleepless nights, dirty diapers, teenage tantrums, college bills." David looked back and forth between the two babies, then at Emily, trying to find words that expressed the absolute certainty he felt. "Emily, a year ago I woke up every morning with a full schedule, but an empty life. I had everything I thought I wanted, but I didn't know what it really meant to want something." He gently stroked Michael's cheek. "You taught me that love isn't about saving someone or being saved. It's about building something together. And this," he gestured to the babies, to her, to the whole moment, "is the most real thing I've ever built in my life. Even knowing it's going to be complicated, that people will always comment on our differences." "Especially because of that," David smiled. "Emily, you transformed a construction company into a force for social change. You turned a workaholic CEO into someone who understands that true success isn't measured in profits. If we can do that, we can do anything." Lily, who had been silently observing the conversation, stood up to kiss her sister's forehead. "Isa, I'll leave you two alone for a moment. I need to call Grandma and share the news." She paused next to David. "Take good care of her, and my nieces and nephews. Always." When they were alone, David and Emily remained silent for a few minutes, simply admiring the babies and processing the magnitude of the moment. "David," Emily finally said, "there's one more thing." "What is it?" She smiled mischievously, a smile he had learned to recognize as a sign of some surprise. "We received a proposal this morning. The City Hall of San Francisco wants to hire our company for an urban revitalization project in the waterfront district, a 3-year project that would require us to establish a permanent office there. And I thought it might be the perfect opportunity for us to start a new life, a new city, new projects, a new family." She paused, away from the curious gazes of Los Angeles, where we can simply be David, Emily, Michael, and Sophia. David considered the proposal, imagining the possibilities. San Francisco, with its beaches, natural informality, and tradition of embracing improbable love stories. "When do we need to decide?" "The mayor wants an answer by the end of the month." "And you? What do you want?" Emily looked at the babies, then back at him. "I want to wake up every morning knowing that we built our own future, not the future that others expected us to build. Then let's go. Just like that, simple." "Emily," David leaned in to kiss her forehead. "In the last few months, I've learned that the best decisions in life are simple. Complicated is just justifying it to others." At that moment, Sophia woke up and began to cry. A strong, determined cry that immediately woke Michael, who responded with his own version of protest. "Welcome to parenthood!" Emily laughed, starting to soothe Sophia, while David made funny faces at Michael. "You know what's funny?" David said, cradling his son. "What?" "Exactly a year ago, my biggest concern was whether I could increase the company's profits by 15%. Now my biggest concern is whether I can change a diaper without causing a disaster. You'll manage. I'll teach you. You'll teach me many things, won't you? All that you want to learn." When the nurse returned an hour later to check on the babies, she found a scene that made her smile. David and Emily asleep in the hospital bed, each holding a baby, the four forming a family that seemed to have always existed that way. Outside, Los Angeles continued its frantic dance of traffic and ambition. But in room 312 of St. Mary's Hospital, 4 people had discovered something that no professional success could buy: the peace of knowing they belonged to each other, And if 2 cups of coffee left on the desk of the new CEO of Anderson Construction the next day, one from David, one from Emily, both accompanied by a note that said, "Thank you for teaching us that true love builds bridges," caused any confusion that was already the successor's problem. Some traditions, after all, deserve to be preserved. 6 months later, on a sunny August morning in San Francisco, David would wake up to the smell of freshly brewed coffee, the sound of children's laughter coming from the kitchen, and the absolute certainty that he had found his true destiny not in a boardroom or a financial report, but in a cup of coffee made with love by a woman who had transformed his life in a definitive and irreversible way. And when Michael and Sophia grew up and asked how Mommy and Daddy met, the story would always begin the same way. Once upon a time, there was a man who thought he had everything, until a magical cup of coffee showed him what he truly needed.